Hello, traders. It's 8:02 a.m. Chicago time on Monday, the 14th of October, 2019. Thanks for joining me again for episode number 1616 today. Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. Mostly a mixed session overnight with some selling going on, mainly driven by the, let's just say, um, pushback by the Chinese against what the president of the U.S. has been telling everyone, that the deal's in place, get ready, farmers, be ready to sell all your crops, and financial companies are next, and all that stuff, that they're going to buy just a huge amount of crop and all that. And that may all be part of the deal. But then China pushed back or announced at about 5:20 Eastern AM, China said to want more talks before signing U.S. President Trump Phase 1 deal. Reportedly, China wants U.S. to also scrap a planned tariff hike in December 2019. Uh, in addition to the hike scheduled for this week, China may send a delegation led by Vice Premier Liu He to finalize a written deal that could be signed by U.S. President Trump and China President Xi at the APEC summit in Chile in November 2019. Anyway, that sent the S&Ps tumbling about 15 points to their low of the session at 2953.75, and we are back in trading at the low of day on Friday. So risk off sentiment, oil is the weakest here. Oil came off 2.3%, $1.28 on the November contract. The cable's off as well. The Euro Stoxx 50 down 0.5%. DAX is down 0.34, and so on and so forth. The bonds are up 22 ticks on the futures, and gold is up $5, trading at $1,493.50. So risk off, but it really is a mixed bag, and we've extended the overnight range lower after testing 29.94 on Friday, a key low volume node up there, composite low volume node up there at that price on a neutral day. So we'll cover that in a minute. In terms of the calendar, when we look at the high impact numbers for the week, we don't have we this evening at 9:30 U.S. Eastern U.S. time, we get the China inflation rate expecting 2.9%. Tomorrow we have claimant count out of Great Britain. We have the zoo economic sentiment indicator out of Germany. Wednesday, we have inflation out of the UK, inflation out of Canada, and retail sales out of the US, unemployment in Australia. So Wednesday is has somewhat scheduled activity. And then on Thursday, we have the inflation rate out of Japan, GDP out of China, which would be probably a significant release. And that's it for the week. Relatively light week in terms of scheduled events. Very busy week in terms of more news flow, most likely as the U.S. and China wrestle over this trade deal. That's it for the calendar. Let's take a look at what was expected on Friday versus what we got. Friday, we were gapping up to 29.68-ish at the trader bite. The expectation is for a push to the 29.75 area, and then a pullback towards the prior range to 29.50. Did not expect the gap to close, and then expected a bounce on the close. What actually happened on Friday is kind of a mix of both. The secondary was a push down, leave the gap zone open, impulse up, and then start moving towards the 2990 area and 2989 or so. And so that's what was expected. Here's what we actually got. What we ended up with is a market that opened at the low of the session. When we have a market that opens at the low of the session and has good delta down here, let me change this to yellow. The white's kind of blending in. Jello. Uh, we have a push right. The low tick is the opening print, and then we have a delta push right off the open. This is the kind of scenario that we do not fade. If you're a Convergent member, on Thursday, I did a study hall on opening types to try to help determine what kind of a day, predict what kind of a day we're likely to get, and what we can and cannot do with the different opening types. If you're a Convergent member, I strongly urge you to watch that 45-minute webinar there. And this is a perfect example of an open drive. We had an open drive all the way up to 29.94, extended the range up. Notice that it didn't really tackle the mid or VWAP until later in the session. And then we end up falling back in as the European close comes around. We end up falling back in and then going neutral on the day. We pushed the IB low. Probability that is somewhere around 23% or something like that. Historical probability. And we push back out lower high and then we sell into the close. There's a pretty strong amount of selling, as you can tell by the volume that on the close, but we ended up leaving a gap zone open down here between Thursday's high of 29.48 and a quarter and Friday's low of 29.6375. So that's what we have. We have a minor kind of double distribution here. The overnight session, even though we closed down at 72-ish, we could only muster up enough buying in the overnight session to push back to the point of control, the prior day's point of control, before selling off. Here's what the order flow looks like. Again, this is ctbookmap.pro. We open up. Here it is. We open up pretty strong. News that again, President Trump was talking about this all weekend, tweeting about this all weekend, that they have a deal and everything's great. And so we end up opening strong and pushing strong, and then sellers come right back in here 2 hours in, and then we get this news right here. This is the announcement from China that wait, the deal is not done yet. And then we drop from 29.69 all the way down to the low of day, 29.5375 on pretty good volume. You could see the quick drop in the volume delta and the high volume that took place here. Strong collisions all the way through, even through this high volume node. We just push right in there, push right through this high volume node, and then we end up putting a low in, and we've been drifting up ever since. The overall order flow in the overnight session is again very murky. We could see above and below us what the depth is. Again, we have that bid in the 29.40-42 area that we had on Friday, this big bid down here. And we have this big offer, of course, at 3,000. We did have an offer, a pretty decent sized offer, 29.94. That was the high a day. And it looks like we're starting to stack them up right in here between 83 and 92. We'll see how that changes after the market opens, and of course, none of the bids or offers mean anything unless they firm up or stay steady as the market moves into them. If the market starts moving into them and they go from maroon to red to orange to gold to yellow to white, and then start turning light blue and dark blue, it just means that those are spoofing orders. Those are not really intending to trade out. So we play, even though I'm looking at this on a bigger picture basis, we want to pay very, very close attention once the market is getting close, and that's benefit of the heat map. Okay, so that's what we have on the order flow overnight. Here's what's happened overnight as part of our review. There it is. It's the overall action. Very steady price discovery process, somewhat multiple distributions. We have pretty good volume, 237,000 contracts traded overnight. And we have this drop, and we haven't recovered from the drop. You can see the pullback was right to the mid, and this session's open, and that's the area that I'm watching for. This 2970, we're likely to drift up to 2970 and close it or tag it on the open. I'm going to watch very closely for a responsive buying up into that area. In terms of what we have for today's plans, it is a Monday. It's really just about being patient today. There's a lot that can happen here in terms of which way this can go. Hard to say. We're on the edge of Friday's range, and we have a gap zone beneath us down into 29.48 and a quarter. My primary expectation is an open auction out of in range or out of range, or just barely in range and out of range. Right here, I expect some responsive buying. I'm looking for this to start pushing up into 29.74, 75. I'm expecting sellers to come back in, push this out of range, and then start moving towards the prior day's range. I expect this to drift down and take out the overnight low to fulfill the stats the overnight stat versus the overnight high, and then we may push into the prior range before the bounce. So that's really the primary scenario. So I'm looking for the quality of the move up, and how resisted is it into 29.75. If it flows through 29.75 and 77 easily, that key low volume node there at 29.75. If it flows right through there easily, then I'm backing off the shorts and I'm looking for pullbacks to buy into the prior point of control in the 29.81 area. If it's resisted on the way up, and I look at the volume scope to see that, if it's resisted on the way up or it's well offered and I see collisions or lifting that's resisted in the order flow in bookmap, in CT bookmap, then I'm going to take a stab at the short, looking for a rotation back down to 29.6375 and then a breakthrough to at least the gap mid, which is 29.56, I think, as a first test in scenario one. Scenario two, looking for a drop right out of the range, push down, most likely an open auction with a downward skew, and then push through the overnight low, get into that gap mid, and then looking for a push higher back in the range to test this overnight point of control, or to just sit steady right in this gap zone. In other words, if we may end up with one of these profiles that are really getting a lot of auction and action right at the gap zone. So we're stuck between 29.50 and 29.75, something like that. That's a pretty wide range for a Monday, 25 points. And I'm not saying that that's what it has to be, but somewhere in there we may be stuck in an open auction. We may see a very, very choppy open. I'm going to wait out the first 15 minutes. As is common, I don't see anything from the overnight session or the current context or where we're located on the open. The opening location is very, 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 very important. It says a lot about what everybody thinks. And then from there, I want to see how it's responding in both directions. Okay, be patient today. There's a lot that can push this thing around. I'll leave you with that. Good luck, and I'll catch you tomorrow morning. Take care.